just to give you an idea, I will be sharing my presentation screen with you shortly. Actually, why don't I do that now? Because you know what happens, those of you that haven't been with me before, I can get forgetful sometimes. And then I get so excited about what I'm doing, and I forget to then share the presentation screen. So now everybody should be able to also see this. That one that I just clicked on by mistake. This, which says ingoing and outgoing inspections, deposits, and damages. You should be able to see that too. So welcome to everybody. Those that are returning, welcome back. Those that are new, welcome. This morning we are going to be talking about ingoing and outgoing inspections, deposits, and damages. And as you can expect, it's not only a mouthful, it is also quite a lot of information which I'm going to go through. However, do not stress. As I said to you, this session is being recorded. The recording, as soon as we're finished, will do whatever it needs to do to itself and end up in the Zoom cloud. And as soon as it's available in the Zoom cloud, I will add you to the recording and give you access to that totally unedited version of the recording. Okay? And then later on, we will send out your certificates, etc. And the recording will be set up on our Training Academy site. So that is the intro. Secondly, if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And if you are shy or you think it's a stupid question, which of course it never is, the only stupid question is the one that doesn't get asked, then please feel free to send me your question by direct message. I think that is more or less what I have to share with you today. Not just share with you, but I think that's more or less what I have to tell you before we go into the training. So let's get going. Ingoing and outgoing inspections, deposits, and damages. The area generally, when we are waving goodbye to our tenants, sometimes we're not waving, no. Sometimes we're having a party. However, it is incredibly critical because a lot of the disputes, I want to venture to say the majority of the disputes that happen around deposits, outgoing deposits and damages. Let's put it that way, the deposits and damages, which of course is related to the ingoing and the outgoing inspections. So we're going to cover this in two parts, and in between we're going to take a break so I can wet my whistle. I do have coffee with me, but what I've noticed is, you will excuse me if I do drink every now and again, but what you will find out is, as I go through, I forget, and so I just go and heat my coffee again in the microwave. That seems to be how I do this. So part one, we're going to cover the ingoing and outgoing inspections, and then let's call it the legalities, the rules of the game when it comes to ingoing and outgoing inspections. And then we're going to head in after the break. So the first half should be about an hour. We're going to talk about the rental deposits and the damages. So we're going to start off now with the ingoing and outgoing inspections. And most importantly, I'm going to approach it from the perspective of how to help you protect your landlord's rights to recover the cost of damages. Because if we as rental professionals who have been mandated, we have the authority from the landlord to do the ingoing and outgoing inspections. The fact that we put ourselves out there as rental professionals also means that we have to give or provide a certain level of service. And at the most basic, on the most basic level, we are talking about fulfilling the legal requirements. If we put ourselves out there, if we market ourselves as rental agents, rental professionals, okay, the reason I use rental professionals is because that includes all team members without having to list a whole lot. If we market ourselves out there as rental agents or rental professionals, and we do not deliver or do not comply with the legal requirements, then we could be in breach of Section 52 or 57, I can't remember now, of the Consumer Protection Act, which says that when we market ourselves and take on landlords and enter into a contract, a service contract with them, for the delivery of a certain service, the landlord or the consumer in this particular case can have a reasonable expectation that at the very least we will do the right thing. And if we don't, then we prejudice their rights, they would have a potential claim against us for damages. In other words, for any losses they have, they could potentially claim from us, which is why this is such a critical part of the process, because this is where most of the money is involved. I know the rentals, the rental amount is also okay, but this is where most of the money is involved. So let's get into it. Firstly, we're going to cover the purpose and the importance of the entry and the exit inspections and your inspection report. This little jotting it on a piece of paper, that just don't cut the mustard no more. Why the ingoing inspection is more important than the outgoing inspection. And I'm going to discuss that and give you some examples. Tips on what should be recorded in the ingoing inspections. I've been in this business for about, exclusively in rentals for about, I can't keep up now, 17 years now. First in New Zealand and now here. So tips on what should be recorded in the ingoing inspection and what I've learned from rental deposit disputes. My approach is always, we are going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. 99% of the time, at least, things go according to plan. But in that 1% that it doesn't, and you end up in a dispute, let's say in a tribunal, etc., then we need to be prepared with our evidence, with our proof. So, the purpose of the entry and exit inspections. Obviously, the entry inspection gets done at the start date, and it is the state of the property. It's really a state of the property report at the beginning of the lease or the tenancy before the tenant moves in. In other words, this is how we are giving you the property, okay? And at the end, we go and we do a state of the property report of this is how you are giving us the property back. And the whole purpose of this is to do a comparison, because there's two things that can happen. And some of the things that I talk about, we will repeat as we go through. There's two things that can happen between these two points in time. One would be called normal wear and tear. In other words, the degradation of something that can be expected by normal people living normally in the house, okay? Things do deteriorate. Tap washers might go, get softer or, I don't know, start leaking, those sorts of things, okay? A good example of that would, for example, be a garage motor's backup battery would naturally deteriorate over time. That is normal wear and tear. So that would be the one thing that we'll note when we compare these two things. Okay, some things will be normal wear and tear. But then the other things, the other differences between the two, if they're not normal wear and tear, then they are what is called damages. Now, damages doesn't mean intentional damage, and that's fundamental here. It doesn't mean intentional damage. It means any damage that is caused that is not normal wear and tear, any degradation, you can even call it any wear and tear that is not normal. That is not normal. Somebody being a bit harsh with something. So if they keep on slamming the door, for example, let's say it's such a household where they slam the door and the door cracks or the door splinters, that is not normal wear and tear. That would then be classed as damages in the terms of what we are going to be talking about. Okay. Mariana, if you are losing connection, the connection, I believe, is fine on my side. Everybody else seems to be okay. But just please remember that we are recording this. The recording is happening in the cloud, and the recording will be made available shortly after the live presentation. So that's for anybody who may lose may lose connection, may, load shedding. We never know what's going on, every strike under the sun. So that covers the purpose of the entry and the exit inspections and the reports, okay? It's basically the before and after. So let's talk now about the exit inspection. I'm going to the exit inspection because I think this is the easy one, okay? Not easy in terms of timing, not easy in terms of time pressure, easy in terms of you seeing what is wrong. That's the easy I'm talking about. So we go to Section 5 of the Rental Housing Act, which is what RHA stands for. I suppose I should call it the RA now because we love doing those things. But anyhow, let's go to the Rental Housing Act. The Rental Housing Act says, at the expiration of the lease, the end of the lease, the landlord and the tenant must arrange a joint inspection of the dwelling together. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further here, it says the landlord and the tenant must arrange a joint inspection. But I just want to clarify that landlord in this case also means agent. So I'm bringing up for you here my PDF version of the Rental Housing Act, and this particular one has got the updates of 2007 in it too. Now, the nice thing about this is, why I like this PDF is because if we go Control F and we say landlord, and we go enter, it goes to find the word landlord everywhere for us. So it's a very, very, very quick way. So what I'm looking for at this point in time is I'm actually looking for the definitions. So we said over here, at the expiration of the lease is what the Rental Housing Act says, the landlord and the tenant must arrange a joint inspection to do it together. So now if we go into that legislation, landlord means the owner of a dwelling which is leased and includes his or her duly authorized agent, or a person who's in lawful possession of a dwelling and has the right to lease or sublease it. So this person who is in lawful possession of a dwelling, this is somebody who's in control of the property and has the right to lease or sublease it, is somebody else, not an agent necessarily. It could also be the main tenant because they have the right to sublease it. But let's forget about that. Let's talk about the other part. The landlord means the owner of a dwelling which is leased and includes his or her duly authorized agent. So when we read landlord in the Act, we can replace it with duly authorized agent, which means an agent that has a mandate to do this particular activity. A mandate is an authority that you get from, that's all it is. It's instructions or an authority that you get from your landlord. So your landlord, for you to be able to here say, at the expiration of the lease, the duly authorized agent, or the agent for short, and the tenant must arrange a joint inspection. It must mean that you must have a mandate that authorizes you to do the exit inspection. I hope that all makes sense. So, at the expiration of the lease, the landlord or agent and tenant must arrange a joint inspection at a mutually convenient time to take place within a period of 3 days prior to such expiration, with a view to ascertaining if there was any damage caused to the dwelling during the tenant's occupation. I've discussed that already. Any changes between the time that they moved in and when they moved out, that is not wear and tear. So at the end of the lease, the landlord and the tenant must arrange, or the agent and the tenant must arrange a joint inspection to do it together. It doesn't mean the landlord physically has to fly down. This is a misunderstanding sometimes. At a mutually convenient time to take place within, okay, so let's talk about this, to take place within a period of 3 days. Now, this is where the legislature was obviously a bit crazy. Because why? It does not, to do it 3 days before, it would make your month end a lot easier in terms of scheduling things. But you can't do it when the people are in there, when they still got their furniture in there. Why? Because then they bump into things as they move out, and then we've got a problem. Because we've now done the exit inspection. So now you're going to have to go and update your exit inspection, etc., and get them to sign. And now there's damages domain, that causes a whole lot of hassle. So how I deal with it is, I know this is stupid, but it's still the law. So I say, and in my communication templates that I use with the tenants, I say very clearly to them, we will do the exit inspection, and then you will give me the keys. The end of the lease is when they give me the occupation back. The occupation back. So I make sure that we do the inspection and we then get the keys back. So I am within 3 days, but the place is vacant. The place is vacant. It is incredibly critical to have the place vacant. I ended up in the small claims court once because there was a whole big mess and one was moving in and one was moving out. Bottom line is it wasn't vacant. It was filthy when we got it back. We did cleaning. The tenant took us to the small claims court. And of course then our photos we had photos of the dirt. Fortunately, this was just a dirt thing now. But if it was a crack or something where there was something standing and we didn't have the photos beforehand, we would have had a problem, because these are the 2 points in time that get used for claims, used for damages claims. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please ask. So I say I define the end of the lease in my communication templates to the landlord. I define the end of the lease as when the property gets given back to the owner. In other words, when I get the keys back. So that is the basics now of the exit. Now there is another option. Should the tenant fail to respond to the landlord's request or the agent's request for an inspection, then the landlord must still, at the end of the lease, inspect the dwelling within 7 days to assess any damages or loss which occurred through the tenancy. So they've made provision there. I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me very seldom, or has happened to me very seldom. This is normally an absconding situation in my personal experience, okay? But the reality is that we arrange a joint exit inspection at a mutually convenient time, because that's what the law says we have to do, for an inspection at the end of the lease. Let's forget now about the 3-day thingy, because we've defined that. At the end of the lease, should the tenant fail to respond to the landlord's request, okay, the landlord must, on expiration of the lease, inspect the dwelling within 7 days. So they have an extra 7 days. Normally you've got somebody moving in tomorrow. So the point is you're going to go and do it in any case if they don't respond. But make sure that you have proof in an instance like this, that you have tried every which way you can to try and get hold of the tenant. Email, WhatsApp, phone calls, leave messages at work, all those sorts of things. Because if you end up in a tribunal, then it might get a little bit tricky, because they're going to say to you, how hard did you try? WhatsApps, all those sorts of things. Another good idea here is that you have an alternative, a next of kin's number or an emergency contact number on your application form, which is then put into your lease agreement, and you use that also, excuse me, as a way to try and get hold of the tenant without, of course, saying anything because of POPIA. Now, what is the purpose of the exit inspection? The purpose of the exit inspection is to record the damages or the defects. That's all it is, okay? And then we're going to compare it to the entry inspection. So we are recording the state of the property when the tenant hands it back to us. That's really all it comes down to. And the purpose of that report, right, as we said in the beginning, is for the purposes of comparison. The other purpose of the exit inspection is I now can make sure that I can see what needs to be fixed before tomorrow, before I move a new tenant in. Is it as clean as what it needs to be? Are there 1 or 2 little things that haven't been fixed? Is the toilet not flushing properly? Because those are things that I've got to get sorted quickly overnight. This is another point. Make sure that your tenants move out on the last day of the month and new tenants that your leases end on the last day of the month, and that your leases start on the first day of the month. That gives you at least the overnight, the afternoon, and maybe the early morning to be able to deal with any small things. There's nothing worse than putting in a tenant into a property, or letting a tenant move into a property, letting a tenant move into a property that is not ready. And when people say to me, but Sean, what standard should it be? I say to them, you should be willing, you should be comfortable to move in there. That's what the standard should be. You should be comfortable to move in there. So we also, that's another purpose of the exit inspection, to see if there's any little gaps, any little things that need to be done before I put somebody into a property that I would be comfortable to move into. Any maintenance or repairs, now that might not be tenant related, these things might have nothing to do with the exit, with the claim, but it's to make sure that any maintenance or repairs have also been done, which you may have actioned a lot earlier in the process, once again, so the property is ready for the new tenant. And if you're using an app like Red Rabbit, for example, your exit inspection can be your starting point for your entry inspection. If the property is perfect condition, you actually will just use that as a starting point for your in. This saves so much time, guys, if you're not using those sorts of apps, because normally what can happen with an app is, if you say, I want to set up an entry inspection, they say, what would you like to use as your starting point? A blank inspection, a blah, blah, blah. And I say, for my entry inspection, I want to set up an entry inspection for this property for tomorrow. And my starting point, I want to be the exit inspection that I did yesterday. That's what I want. You know how much time that is going to save you. Honestly, you only then mark the differences. So it serves as your draft entry inspection as well. Please don't do what some people have done. And I've heard, and recently somebody told me where something was thrown out of the tribunal because some agents have decided that they just take the exit inspection and they use that for the entry inspection. No, that's not what I mean. And that's why I'm being so specific. If you're doing it electronically, you set up an entry inspection, okay? You set up an entry inspection and you use the information from yesterday's exit inspection as the starting point. But don't just take I've seen this is pure laziness. Unfortunately, it does exist, where people will just take the exit inspection and say, this is the entry inspection because nothing changed. I'll tell you now, the tribunal throws it out, okay? So you will not be protecting your landlord's rights, and you may end up paying for stuff. So be careful of those little errors that one can make. So I hope that's clarified all of that. Some exit inspection tips. I think the vacant part is not actually a tip; it's a rule. Okay, make it a rule. You cannot. You will be opening yourself up for so much trouble if it's not vacant when you do your exit inspection. And vacant means everything removed. If they've left their partner behind, it's not vacant. Okay? If they've left their pot plant behind, I'm not saying it's not vacant, but they're going to pay you for you to take it away. But vacant meaning they have moved out. They have moved out. And we're going to talk about a process where we do a pre-entry, a pre-exit inspection, etc., as we go through. So it must be vacant. There's too many stories. Well, actually, I don't really have many stories of them not vacant. That one that I had with the people moving in and out at the same time, and there was just absolutely no chance. That is the worst story that I can think of people doing an exit inspection when it wasn't vacant. And it was our agent, and I was the manager, and I'm responsible. But in that particular case, she had absolutely no choice. But fortunately, the filth was obvious. Make sure that on your inspection, and this counts for exit and entries there, have a space where you document the keys. Please don't do the one front door, two back door. That means nothing. One remote. That means nothing. Everybody should now have an inspection app now on your phone. You take a photo of the keys. You take a photo of the remote. You take a photo of the fob. If any of them, in security complexes, for example, they have numbers on it, make sure that number is on there, okay? So you make sure you're getting the keys back and take photos of the ones you get back. Take photos of the utility readings, okay? Take photos of the utility readings, whatever. If it's prepaid, of course, you're probably not going to worry. But if it's metered, take a photo so that you can then do an accurate pro rata or proportional billing for the exiting tenant. So take a photo of the utility meters. Communicate your expectations. Please communicate, and I've got some stuff that I'm going to help you with as we go through here just now. Please make sure that the tenants understand what you expect. Your damage, your excess wear and tear this is how it works now. It's just a reality in life. Your excess wear and tear is their normal wear and tear. And they must understand it's not normal. We're not talking normal wear and tear for their family. That's not what we're talking about. You can get a rough family in there maybe. It's not normal wear and tear for their family is one way of explaining it. No, you mustn't explain it to them this way. It's normal wear and tear for normal people. That's what it is. Normal people that live like normal people. I saw some photos this week on Facebook. M5 Property Addicts. I'll see if I can find it. I'm going to see if I can find it for you in the break. They put a photo in of, probably they got back, and I'll let you see what it looks like. Hopefully you'll never have one of those. So communicate your expectations, okay? Make sure the landlords also understand. The exit inspection is the after photo. It is where we draw the line in the sand. Too many times situations happen. So we're not talking communicate expectations. I'm talking communicate your expectations to your landlords and to your exiting tenants. Because one thing that landlords need to understand is that this is where we're drawing the end line in the sand. Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, this is where we're saying to the tenant, this is not acceptable and you're responsible for it. Unfortunately, we have to man or woman up. We have to person up at that point in time and say that to them. So Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, because some landlords, as soon as their tenant is vacated, they say, oh, can I go and have a look at my property tomorrow? So then they go in tomorrow, and then tomorrow they want to add to your list. If you end up in a dispute at the tribunal and you have a list that was added to, in other words, it was not noted at that opportunity that the law says you have to create, called the joint exit or outgoing inspection. If it was not noted then, you will probably find that claim will be thrown out in the court. And you know who they're going to be angry with. They're going to be angry with you, not the court. The court doesn't get angry. But the landlords are going to be angry with you. So make sure that the landlords understand that if they want to have input, they need to give input through the process, or if there's something critical, like their Persian carpets. And this does happen, ladies and gentlemen, their Persian carpet, that they want to just check every hair, that they haven't replaced it with cheap hair or whatever. I'm being ridiculous on purpose. If they want to do that and they want to do a microscopic inspection of their Persian carpet, they must come with their microscope to the joint exit inspection and do it. That's when they must do it. And I know I'm making a joke now, but I do know of a case where a Persian carpet was damaged and it was claimed from the tenants. Okay, I hate fully finished, but anyhow, it was claimed from the tenant and it was going to take 18 months for the landlord to replace it. I don't know if the people in what used to be Persia had to go and make it again, but anyhow. So make sure that the landlords understand this, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, is where we draw the line in the sand. So speak now. Come and speak now or forever hold your peace. dates and timestamps. Make sure your photos have dates and timestamps. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, having a whole group of photos there called DSC 101286 and 1028, whatever that number is with a 7 at the end. Now, having that with a date and timestamp is also confusing, because you think you're going to remember that 2 years later or whatever, if that was done in the ingoing inspection, or if you end up in the tribunal. How are you going to prove that that photo of the wall that you took is this piece of wall here next to me? Think about that. This is why we've either got to save it properly, or we've got to have context photos, etc. Because in the end, you end up in a tribunal, and I'm not trying to be negative that you're always going to end up in a tribunal. Remember, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I should make a song of that. Anyhow, so date and timestamps. Make sure your photo's got date and timestamp, but more than that, make sure that you know what the photo is of. So have a bigger view if necessary. Once again, if you're using the apps, whatever apps you're using, whatever software you're using on your phone, it will normally be able to help with that, because you will be doing the bedroom or whatever. So you'll be doing that beforehand. Have your entry on inspection on hand, because remember, this is where we're drawing a line. Have your entry on inspection on hand so that you can then say whether this is a tenant's responsibility or not. Okay? Because this is your opportunity to do it. This is your opportunity to do it. Because this is where we draw the line in the sand. This is the state of the property as handed back by the tenants. If in doubt, please don't make a judgment call that's going to bite you in the bum later. When I say if in doubt, let me give you an example. I had an example once of, and this covers a number of these matters, where somebody called me and said, Sean, I need your help. And I said, okie dokie, what's the problem? As I do. Now, I normally put on my other voice. But anyhow, so I said, what's the problem? They said, no. We did an exit inspection with the tenant, and everything was fine, and we marked it as fine. Now the landlord has come back to us, because now the landlord went to the property, and the landlord said the snooker table is not whatever the word is, no? Not flat, not balanced. I'll think of the word just now. Not balanced. And it's very expensive, having to balance this. And he now wants us to claim for that. And I said, well, you've got a problem because you've got an exit inspection. Why wasn't the landlord there? No, we didn't think about that. So this is an example. Firstly, in that particular case, in the pre-exit inspection report, we would have said to the landlord, everything looks okay, and the landlord will hopefully then have said to us, have you checked that it is balanced? And I would have said to them, no, I do not have the foggiest idea how to check that. Would you like to come and check? And the landlord would probably say yes, or I will send my balance expert out to come and do that. No? It's the wrong word I'm using, but anyhow. Or I would have said, could we have your balance expert to come to the exit inspection with us? Because this is very important. And I'm no balance expert. I'm a rental agent. So, or I would get there, and the landlord would have said to me, that thing has to be balanced. And I would have said, well, I've got no way of doing it, but don't worry, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord. What I'm going to do is, in the exit inspection report, I'm going to say, to be determined by an expert. And I'm going to put a notice that I am not, accredited to check the balance of the snooker table, et cetera. But now, if it's a specific thing like that, then you would have also had to prove in the beginning. So if there's something technical and you are not sure if this is a tenant-related issue, let's say you turn on the taps in the shower, and the water builds up, and you're not sure if this is a clog in the drain, where the drain meets the one next door, etc. Then say to be determined by a professional, and you put in your notes, call in a plumber to determine source of problem and liability, or something to that effect. Okay, do that. I'm comfortable going to a tribunal and saying to them, at that point in time, I was not sure. However, since then, my plumber has gone in, and my plumber has told me it's hair buildup from about 3 months ago, from dark, long hair of 36 centimeters long. So, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, I don't have dark blonde hair of 36, and I haven't been showering here in any case. So that's what I mean by saying, if in doubt, note and refer it. Feeling obliged to make a judgment call there and then, could it land you up in hot water? So hopefully that all makes sense. See, we have some questions. Let's see what we have. Level. Oh, Leonie, you should have so much shouted it. Level. Whether it is level. That was the word. Gelijk. Level. That's the word. The snooker table was level, not balanced. Yeah, I thought it had a okay, then somebody else has said, yeah, let's have a look at this. We have problem tenants. The entry inspection was done by me, but they were all over the house and did not pay attention. They are making false claims such that a key that was broken off in the door, and I was 100% sure that no key was broken off as I opened the door with the only key we had. This was handed to them. Then an interleading door slammed shut. This was a few days after they moved in. We got a locksmith out and he did not find a broken off key in the lock, and on the insistence of the tenants, replaced the lock. Who is responsible for the payment? The interleading door opened and closed at the inspection. After the wind draft, the door was damaged and had to be repaired. Who is responsible for the payments? Wow, you've got quite a few things here. I'm telling you what, I'm going to leave that until we come back from a break, if you don't mind. I'm just going to put your Q&A, because there's quite a few things. I'll try and come back and answer some of those questions. It's very, very technical. So let's carry on now with the aim of the exit inspection. I think I've covered this already. Firstly, to get the property, firstly, to have the after picture of the tenant's occupation of the property. But then also to have the property ready for occupation for the new tenant. If you start off a tenancy by giving somebody a property that's not up to standard, that tenant relationship, and I don't mean that other sort of, fuffy stuff. I'm talking about the tenant business relationship will never recover. I remember sending somebody a letter of demand about 3 years into their lease. And the very first thing they said to me, we've never had one before. And I said, because you've never paid late before. But besides that, when they came to see me about it, they said, do you know, when we moved into that property, there was a bottle of Handy Andy standing in the shower. Yeah, the people that can't remember to pay their rent, they can remember a bottle of the Handy Andy now. So have it ready for occupation so that you can start that business-tenant relationship off on a good footing. Avoid need for attention to cleaning, gardening, repairs, etc. So let's see if we can get the exit inspection by doing a pre-entry inspection to have the cleaning, the gardening, and the repairs done beforehand, okay? And most importantly, to have it done before the occupation is what I'm referring to here. Letting somebody move into a property and now all of a sudden they're moving in and it still needs cleaning, or there's something's not working, and you say to them, don't worry, we're going to attend to that. How would you feel? How would you feel if you move in and the stove is not working? But don't worry, we will attend to it. That's most not right. You're going to be grumpy. So think about it as if you are going to be moving into that property. Think about it that way. Oopsie. So that's the aim of the exit inspection. Now, the concept of a pre-exit inspection, this is it's platinum. Okay. A pre-exit inspection, and I know you're going to say, Sean, I've got enough work to do. Let me tell you, this is the best thing since sliced bread. The pre-exit inspection is a complimentary opportunity you offer. You offer by saying, let's schedule one. No? You offer it as if there's no other alternative, that you go to the property and do a pre-exit. Pre-exit just means a preliminary exit or a before the exit inspection. At a time when you're not under stress, you're not having to rush to your next inspection because it's not month end. You and the tenants can go through the property and you can give them advice. You can explain to them your expectations. You can say to them, that hole in the wall wasn't there earlier. That's what it is. The goal of this is that I explain my expectations. I point out things that need to be attended to. I give them the opportunity to attend to them, conditional on certain things. Okay, that's what we do. And we then say, we then issue a report where we state all of these things. Now this, remember I talked about how you could use a previous inspection as the starting point in most software for your next one. You then use this inspection as the starting point for your exit inspection. You've already saved heaps of time when you get there on the last day, but more than that. I'm not saying you're going to get the property back perfectly. I'm not saying they're going to now all of a sudden be angels, but you are going to get this property back on the last day of the exit inspection. I can promise you in a much better state than what you would have got it, in a much better state, or much closer to where you needed to be, that you would have got it if you did not take that time out to go through the property with the tenant, explain to them where you saw the problem areas, told them that they can fix it up until the time of the exit inspection, and that after that time they will not be able to fix it because the landlord is then entitled to fix it. No permission required, no quotes required, to fix it and to take the money out of their deposit. The law allows him. But, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, this is now your opportunity. The garden, for example, you better get that grass greener because this landlord's going to want that grass replaced. Whatever it is, okay? It helps to avoid disputes because you're having those discussions there and then they're saying to you, no, but that's wear and tear. And you're saying to them, well, I'm sorry, but in my professional opinion, it's not wear and tear. Because that's everything's supposed to wear and tear in the end then. No, it's wear and tear. And that's when you have to somehow find the words. And I can't find them while I'm sitting here now to say to them, it might be wear and tear, but it's excessive wear and tear. The Act allows very clearly for normal wear and tear. That, in my opinion, experience of managing, of having done 5,556 outgoing inspections over the last 37 years, look at me now, is not normal wear and tear. So that's it. So it helps to avoid disputes, avoid misunderstandings. It also provides you with proof. Should you end up in a dispute and you've done a pre-exit inspection, you've sent a pre-exit inspection report and highlighted the things that you think are an issue, you've done all of those, okay? And they still don't go and fix it. They opt. Because basically, if they don't fix it and you've done all of that and you've explained it to them, then they have opted to have the landlord fix it out of their deposit. They have taken the choice. This is how life works. You give people chances, they either take that opportunity or they've made a choice not to take that opportunity. No or doing nothing is a choice. So we then have proof that we did our darndest. We pointed it out 2 weeks in advance, Mr. and Mrs. Tribunal Adjudicator. What more do you expect us to have done? It takes a lot of stress and time out of month end when you're going 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And then they're like, oh, I haven't got ready. That one that I was telling you about that ended up in the tribunal because of the dirt. He hadn't moved out. He was taking his undies still and packing them out of the drawer. I don't know what he was packing them into because I wasn't there. Probably a checker's bag. But he was still doing that. I'm sorry. I get to the exit inspection and my team were all authorized to do this. They say, well, we're still finished. We're going to be another hour. I'm sorry, because remember, it's a mutually convenient time. This is our mutually convenient time. I have to leave now. We will have to reschedule. And you can charge them a rescheduling fee. And you can charge them an out of, say, I'm going to have to come back tonight. But you must make sure that this is in your mandate and your lease agreement. Anyhow, it really, really, really reduces stress and time at the end, saves time at month end. So, let's see, we've got another question. Let's see if it's... May we ask for the cost of the additional exit inspection if the tenant is not attended to cleaning or gardening and repairs and the agent has to get it done and then redo the inspection? You don't need to redo the inspection. You don't need to redo the inspection. There was one opportunity created where at mutually convenient time, okay, you did the inspection. It was not attended to. You then are entitled. I'm assuming this is an exit inspection here. You then are entitled. So sorry, the question is, may we ask for the cost of the additional exit inspection if the tenant has not attended to cleaning or gardening and repairs and the agent has to get it done and then redo the inspection? I'm going to make the assumption this is an exit inspection. If I get to an exit inspection, my job is not to give them an opportunity to fix this. I've explained to them what's happening. We've made a mutually convenient time to do a joint inspection. We are doing the joint inspection. I am noting the damages. Remember, anything that's not normal wear and tear is damages. I'm noting the damages. I am now going to commission, or I'm going to instruct tradespeople to go and fix those damages, and I am taking it out of your rental deposit. The law allows me to. And we'll talk about that as we get into the second half. The law allows me to. So I'm not going to go and re-inspect the property. Not going to go and re-inspect the property. However, everything depends on your lease. So make sure your lease says this, or your communications with the tenant. And we'll talk about that after the break too. If I say to the tenant, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we are going to be coming to do the exit inspection on this time and this date. Please note, if you are not ready, and you are not allowed to charge a tenant for entry or exit, because that's a legal requirement, their legal right, okay? But I can say to them, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we have now agreed to 9 o'clock on the 31st of, let's make it the 30th of November 2022, and I have an hour available. Say you have 45 minutes, make it a bit shorter. I have 45 minutes, which is normally sufficient. However, should I get there and you are not ready, you have not vacated the property and I have to reschedule, there's a rescheduling fee of 2,500 Rand. Okay, I'm being ridiculous. Okay? There's a rescheduling fee of whatever the fee is. And Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we need to get it done on that day because I have a new tenant moving in tomorrow. If we need to do it after hours, I have an after-hours surcharge of 50% or 100%, whatever it is. That I believe you are allowed to do. But I would not go and re-inspect. I'm either here to inspect and do it. I hope that makes sense. I'm either here to inspect and to do it, or if I'm not able to do it now, we are rescheduling, and you're paying a rescheduling fee. And I'm sorry, it has to be done today, so I'm going to have to come back at 9 o'clock tonight, or whatever the ridiculous idea is, just to make effect. And then I'm afraid there's going to be a surcharge. Okay, so let's get into the entry inspection. The Rental Housing Act says the tenant and the landlord, remember, could mean agent, must jointly together, don't have to hold hands, together, before, ladies and gentlemen, read this. This is the Act. The Act says before the tenant moves into the dwelling. If you do it too late, you have breached the Act. I have a case with somebody that I know happens to be a tenant, and there's a tribunal thingy next Tuesday, and they've asked me to help. Their agent gave them the keys on the 1st of February, and came and did the inspection on the 7th of February with furniture in. You know what fun I'm going to have with that tribunal? Yeah. I've also had an agent do it. It is a disaster. But besides that, it's in breach of the Act. So the tenant and the landlord must jointly, before the tenant moves into the dwelling, inspect the dwelling to ascertain, this is what the law says, to ascertain if there are any defects or damages. To ascertain. I say that is no good anymore. Because these days, if you go, I know that's what it says. I know that's what it says. And we are going to ascertain the existence of any defects or damages. But I believe the expectation is now bigger than that. It's more professional than that. Because you know what happens when you go to the tribunal, and I'll tell you, this is what happens. You go to the tribunal and you say, Mr. and Mrs. Tribunal person, we are claiming damage of this stoveplate. Because look, it is excessive wear and tear. We call it buggered. No, it is excessive wear and tear. And you know what the tribunal says to you? Can you show me the photo of that stoveplate before it had the excessive wear and tear? So we can see this tenant, it happened during this tenant's occupation. The tenant doesn't have to cause the excessive wear and tear, it has to happen during the occupation. So during the occupation, and you say, well, you know what, there was nothing wrong with the stoveplate at the beginning, so I didn't take a photo. So, because it just said I must look for the existence of any defects or damages. There was no damages on that stoveplate at that point in time, so I didn't take a photo. I only took photos of damages. They are going to say to you, how on earth do you want us to prove it? And I always use the Weight Watchers or the bodybuilding powder ad as an example of this. They show you either the larger person and then the afternet, the Weight Watchers, or they show you the before photo or the photo afterwards for the Weight Watch, for the bodybuilding powder. If you don't have one of those two photos, you're proving nothing. Nobody's going to buy the Weight Watchers or the bodybuilding powder. If you don't have those two photos, you're proving nothing to the tribunal. That's why I say we need to make a state of the property report. We need to make a report of the state of the property. Think about that, because they're always going to ask you for a before. And if you only look at defects or damages, you're not going to have the before unless there was a defect or damage. And of course, there was never defects or damages before. So the tenant and the landlord must jointly, before the tenant moves into the dwelling, inspect the dwelling to ascertain the existence or not of any defects or damages therein, with a view to determining the landlord's responsibility for rectifying any damages. Okay. With a view to determining the landlord's responsibility for rectifying any defects or damages, or with a view to registering such defects or damages. Ladies and gentlemen, the landlord doesn't have to fix anything, everything. If there's a crack in that wall and does not affect the beneficial occupation of the property, if it's going to scar them emotionally, well, then they're just going to have to pay for extra counseling. No. But it says in the law to determine, there's two reasons for this. We're either going to determine the landlord's responsibility, or we are going to register these defects. So we do not have to fix, if there's scratches on the wall, okay, and this is how they looked at the property. I generally work on the basis is, if this is how you looked at the property, as long as the things are functioning, the toilet is flushing, the shower is working, you know, the normal stuff, the stove plate is working, as long as those things are fine. Otherwise, it's basically footstools. You get it like you saw it, unless you brought up something else, but that's a rental application training video. So that's generally how it works. I hope that makes sense. So we are registering the defects as damage, or we're determining the landlord's responsibility. But it's not where people say, oh, but the landlord must repaint this, it doesn't look nice. Oh, did it deteriorate since you saw it yesterday before you put in your application? Yeah, I do need to go on. I'm enjoying myself so much there. A list of defects registered in terms of blah, blah must be attached as an annexure. Your report, your ingoing report becomes part of the lease. That's really all it says. It becomes part of a lease. A defects list is not sufficient. You need to compile, a comprehensive state of the property report. So the purpose of the entry inspection is, once again, we want to make sure everything's occupation ready. All the maintenance repairs that we had to get done was done before. I am creating a snapshot of this property at this point in time. And in the end, I'm going to compare this to the end result. Now, to what this property looks like when the tenants have left. The important part here is the comparison. And this is why I say just listing defects is not enough. Because how do I know what they are going to do? Well, how do I know what they are going to do so that I know to take a before photo? I don't know about you, but my crystal ball, I don't think I ever got issued with one. Or if I did, I think it was stolen, liberated, or stolen. No? I don't know. Entry inspection tips. Before occupation, must. Take a walkthrough. Do your inspection, but also take a walkthrough with a timestamp there, where you can pan across it. I'm told by many agents that has been their saving grace, because you did not expect them to burn a black, or the kids to take matches and burn a black hole on that wall and burn the cover for the light switch. I'm making up stories based on experience. And burn that cover for the light switch. Who would take a light switch photo? I mean, seriously, who's going to do anything there? But when you came in, it's all squished up and black. Yeah? But now you don't have a before picture. But if you are panning with the video, and you get one of these unbelievable things at the end, you can freeze frame it, you can print it out, and you take it to the tribunal and you pay away. Keys. Make sure that you take a photo of the keys that you're going to be giving them. Yeah? Utility readings. Make sure you take a photo of the utility readings. Ask, I don't know why I've got landlords there. Sorry. Dates and timestamps. Make sure that you have dates and timestamps. I'll come back to that landlord's portion just now. If the landlord, you need to speak to the landlords. If there's a snooker table, for example, okay, you want the landlords to tell you about that, so that you know. You maybe want to have one of them little water passa, I think it's called, that thing, that level, the water level. You put it on and you take a photo with it on, or something like that. You need a photo like that if there's something technical. We need to consult with our landlords. Failure to inspect. Failure of the landlord, I'm going to stop now. Failure of the landlord to inspect the dwelling in the presence of the tenant. And this is either ingoing or outgoing. Failure of the landlord to inspect the dwelling in the presence of the tenant. Either in or outgoing is an acknowledgement by the landlord that the dwelling is in a good and proper state of repair. It's an acknowledgement that it's ixi perfecti wonderful. And the landlord will have no further claim against the tenant, who must then be refunded the full deposit. Now, can you imagine that if you failed to inspect it, or you went and you inspected the property like those silly agents did that I'm going to tribunal with next week, you inspected the dwelling after the furniture was in, and the floor was perfect, but somehow the kid decided to go and do an escape from prison project under the bed. and gnawed away at the wood to see how long it would take. He was an inquisitive little kid. Of course, an inquisitive kid is what the parents would say. He was just learning about a woodwork. And now you see it in the end, but you didn't have it in the beginning. Who is going to be held liable? Who is going to be held liable? You. And the landlord under Consumer Protection Act can expect you to have done your job properly. And you can end up paying for that whole new wooden floor. And you know what my luck would be? It would have been imported from New Zealand kauri or something like that. So now this is also important because this says it's not only failure by the landlord to inspect the dwelling. Okay? But if you lose one of those reports or you lose your photos, how often has a staff member gone or the computer has crashed? And you say to the person of the tribunal, I had the most beautiful photo, best one I've ever taken in my whole career now, of that spot. I know it, I remember it, I can see it. And the tribunal person is going to say, unfortunately, we can't see in your mind. You have no proof to show us. So we have to accept it was in perfect condition. Declined. So yeah, inspection reports. Why is the entry inspection so important? It's harder because I don't know what to anticipate. You are trying to preempt and you actually don't know. If there's a dispute at the end, you need to provide your proof. Experience is going to play a long role. No report is as good as no inspection. Some tips. Make sure that you make comments like in good condition. Going back to that question that was asked, doors and locks. Doors and locks. I always open and close the doors. I don't just take photos of these things. I'm not a photographer. I always make sure they're open and close properly. Window locks especially in there, open and close. I always open and close taps to make sure they're okay. Why? Because if they're going to drip, 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 or they make like my tap upstairs, I open, nothing happens. All of a sudden, and I'm all wet. I'm used to doing that. Doesn't bother me. It's my fault I haven't had it fixed. But the new tenant's going to tell you that was the important, I almost said Fabergé. That was the important, whatever those makes of frocks are, man. Versace. It was the Versace frock that now got the water on it. And you know what? She bought it because it was a special, dissolvable frock for a secret occasion. And now it's missed. Check the tap. Electricity applied. Maybe just have a little tester that you can test now. Not because I believe this is your responsibility to do, but I'm trying to help you make your life easier. Because now a new person moves in and these plugs are not working. You know what? You're going to have to fix them. Why don't we just try and get them fixed beforehand? It doesn't mean that and do this at the pre-exit when you've got the time. Then get the electrician in. Open cupboards, doors and drawers, because you know those things are funny. Open and close windows. Flush toilets. Open showers, let them run for a little while. I turn stoves on and walk around the property and then just come back and see if they felt warm or not. Those sorts of things. Sliding doors. They can be very, very tricky. Gardens, outdoors. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you take a video of the garden. You may not be into trees and forests and stuff, but so many disputes. That tree, I'm going to be ridiculous. That tree was so much taller when they moved in. I'm sure they cut it. That tree is so much browner when they moved in. I want it replaced with a new one that size. Please make sure you make a good video of the ceiling. So many people don't look up. You know what? They're going to look up when there's damage. There's skirting. This is when you pan. When you pan, you can do all of these things. Garage doors, check they open and close. Maybe take a video of them opening and closing. Maybe in the case of having had a walkthrough video with the door opening and closing or clicking or whatever might have been a good idea for that problem that we had. Appliances, the stove, the extractor, is it working? Is it not working? Limitations. We are not technical experts. Please, please, please don't pretend to be. If we are uncertain, please note it and have a disclaimer on your exit inspection. I had a lot to get through. So we are now, I'm just going to, what if the tenant is not focusing, they're running around from room to room and do not adhere to your instructions to stick to one room, finish inspection and move to the next room? I would just say to them, I'm busy doing the inspection report. Do you understand that this involves or this protects you? It's important. It's important. If anybody, I don't have all the answers yet. It's important that we go through this properly. Okay, we are going to run around just now. You can do the running when we do the video inspection, would be my thoughts. So that's, if anybody else has any advice on that, please feel free to pop it in there. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to take, we're now at the halfway point, and then we're going to get into the deposits and damages. Have you got an idea out of? Have you got value? Have you got at least one valuable point? Have you got at least one valuable point this morning? Let me know while I'm going to have to go eat that coffee again. Eh? Fantastic. Thanks, Chef Frida. Thank you. Guys, I'm just going to take a 10-minute break. Let's say we come back at 20 past. I'm going to assume you've given me permission. Thank you very much. And we'll come back at 20 past. Okie dokie, I'm back. I see we've lost 2 people. But I'm sure that was due to, I know there was somebody that had to go somewhere, at least one person. Okay, so I promised you that I would show you this photo. Sorry, let me just try and get this. So this I saw, I think it was yesterday. When you see this, you know it was the right thing. You can still see my screen there. When you see this, you know it was the right thing to evict this tenant. Look at this. Can you believe it? Absolutely. I don't know what I would do. I must admit, I've had a house very close to this. We had a situation once where the agents were doing the inspection, and I was the park business owner at the time, but also the rental manager. And we had a property, and for some other reason, and I still can't remember why, I went to go and do a routine inspection. And it wasn't like this. There was nothing broken, but the clothes, the kitchen was piled high with stuff. And evidently she had OCD and couldn't touch things. And she was scared of hojas and I don't know what sort of nonsense, everything. But it was an absolute disaster. And none of the agents had ever told me to come with and have a look at it. In the end, we also got rid of them, but because she was piling the stuff everywhere, and supposedly she had this fear of germs. I think she was cultivating them, if you ask me. And she left the husband there and all he could say was, my wife's got OCD. And I said to him, I don't know what, I'm not allowed to touch anything, he said, because she's got OCD. But the hojas were busy growing in the house, man. So that's some of the ridiculous things you can do. And these are some of the ridiculous situations one can get. But let's carry on so that I can make sure that we cover everything, because there is quite a lot of important stuff we still need to cover. Sorry, the chat, let me just go back to the chat. I just said, thank you, Frida. Today's in and out inspection was very helpful for me, especially if landlord does not attend the out inspection. Tenants are usually in a rush when you want to do the out inspection. I fully understand that. The only way if you've done a pre-exit, then you get a much quicker exit inspection is the one tip I can give you. It says, what about the extractor fan in the bathroom? Very old and makes a huge noise. Owner does not want to replace. They say cost is for the tenants. Absolute nonsense. Ask them if they expect the tenants to take it with them when I know I'm being cheeky now, but I'm being cheeky on purpose. They say that would be normal wear and tear. If it is very old and it's starting to go wonky, this is not a tenant problem. Okay? My suggestion would be to say to the owner, the tenants found it there when they came in. If they replace it, then you're going to have to give them permission to take it with them. Something ridiculous like that to wake them up. This is when I sit an owner down and I say, look, I'm very, very sorry, but you don't understand your responsibilities as a landlord. One of your responsibilities is to maintain the property. This is called maintenance. Maintain maintenance. This is what this is called. This is not called damage. We've spoken about what if the tenants are not focusing and they're running around. If anybody else has advice, if the tenant's not focusing and they're not running around from room to room and do not adhere to your instructions to stick to one room, finish inspection, move to the next room. I don't know how else to put this except to say we need to take control of those tenants as we move in and explain to them this is the process. The other thing I would say to them is, if we miss anything now, okay, if that's an outgoing inspection, this could be a ploy of theirs, of course, to distract you. And I would not let myself get distracted. If this is an ingoing inspection, I would say I don't think you understand the importance of this process. We are documenting the state of the property when you move in. Okay? anything that is not documented now but gets picked up at the end of the lease, you will be responsible for financially. So I suggest let's focus. Well, I think we've done that. I'm just going to that other question. We talked about problem tenants entry inspection. I'm going to leave that to the end and go through that because I want to make sure we can get everybody finished as far as possible. Okie dokie. So we're going to get as far as, well, no, we're not going to get as far as we can. If we run over time, ladies and gentlemen, then I'm apologizing now in advance for that. I will continue so that we can complete this, but you will have access to the recording by sometime this afternoon, and I will send you a link to that. Okay. So how to avoid the avoidable disputes, and I've used that word very, very specifically. I've been in this business for 20 plus years now, and there are some disputes that aren't avoidable. Why? Because some people are dispute people. Some people are dispute people. I think they call them Karens now without sounding sexist, or Kens or Karens. Yeah? They are around, and they are not avoidable. They are not avoidable. The time we try and avoid them is when we are looking at the rental application and they're already showing us they're a Ken or a Karen. And I know some people take exception to those words. So we're going to have a look now about the Rental Housing Act and damages, the tenant's rights to repair damages. I've touched on some of that already. The landlord's rights to repair damages, the damages versus fair wear and tear. I think we've actually covered that quite a lot already. A best practice exit procedure and how to avoid with the, how to deal. My mind is reading too fast. How to deal with the unavoidable dispute. So let's firstly go back to our guiding document, our rentals Bible, so to speak, the Rental Housing Act. What does it say about damages? Okay. So, firstly, it says the landlord's rights against the tenant include this. You see, it says a rights now. Sorry. I made new coffee because I don't like that cold stuff. The Rental Housing Act, the Bible for rental, says the landlord has a right against the tenant, or has a number of rights against the tenant, including on termination of the lease to receive that property back in a good state of repair except for fair wear and tear. In a good state of repair, except for fair wear and tear. Not unfair, not excessive use, not that sort of stuff. So this is a right the landlord has. It's not as if we're being nasty to anybody. We are employed to protect the landlord's rights, and this is one of the rights that we are usually mandated to protect. The landlord also has a right to claim compensation for damages to the rented housing property or any other improvements on the lands, the outside toilet, the bird's bath. That's an improvement on the lands now. The big apple tree. That's an improvement on the lands. I had one the other day where they pulled the tenant, removed all of the ivy. That's an improvement on the land. If the tenant didn't like the ivy, they shouldn't have moved into the property. The ivy didn't grow up that wall between the time they viewed it and between the time they finished, they moved in. These people are crazy. I had a tenant once that called me and said, could you ask the landlord if you could please remove the bath and put in the shower? And I said, I think you misunderstand. Yes, I'll ask the landlord, but I think you've got a fundamental misunderstanding. You didn't buy the house. You are paying for the use of the house. Some people are crazy, I'm telling you. So they also have a right to claim for compensation for damage to the property caused by, and this is where damages does not mean intentional, caused by the tenant, a member of the tenant's household, or a visitor of the tenant. So people can't say, yes, but so-and-so did that. No, I don't care if so-and-so did that. So-and-so was there with you. Did you let them in? Or did they come through the window in the middle of the night while you were sleeping and break the glass? No, they didn't come through the window and break the glass. Oh, they were there when you were there. Okay, we call that a visitor. They broke it. Your problem to get the money from them. Our problem to get the money from you. And I'll tell you what, it ain't going to be no problem. No. So, Section 5 says, the tenant and the landlord must jointly, before the tenant moves into the property, inspect the dwelling to ascertain. We've done this already. We registered such defects. Okay? And we've done that. Just a little bit of a reminder. At the expiration of the lease, the landlord and tenant must arrange a joint inspection to take place within 3 days before the end of the lease, as silly as what that is, to ascertain if there was any damage caused to the dwelling during the tenant's occupation by their visitors, by their guests, by their family. You know that child that's, he's just so autistic, he can't just help himself when he sees a crown. I'm sorry, this isn't the Louvre. End of the lease is when we give the property back to the owner. So those are the parts that we've done. And then this, now, these are the new parts. At the end of the lease, the landlord may apply, they may use the deposit and the interest towards the payment for all amounts for which the tenant is liable. That can be rent arrears, that can be the fact of the LOD they didn't pay, etc. All of those things, including the reasonable cost. So, and the expiration of the lease, I'm just going to read the important parts. At the end of the lease, the landlord may use the deposit and interest to pay for the reasonable cost of repairing damage, anything above fair wear and tear, damage to the dwelling during the lease. And the balance of the deposit and interest must be refunded to the tenant no later than 14 days of restoration of the dwelling to the landlord. So, after the end of the lease, the landlord may repair damage. You don't see anything there about, I need the permission, no. At the end of the lease, the landlord may repair the damage and they do not need the permission of the tenant. They have this right. Okay? And then you see they must then give the deposit back to the tenant not later than 14 days of the dwelling being restored. Restored. The damage being fixed. 14 days. There's going to be 3 numbers you're going to remember here. 7, 14, 21. The 14 one is different. I know it's still a 7 times table, but the middle one is different. Just like the middle child is always a bit different. Now, so the middle one is different. We'll talk about the 7 and the 14. 7 and the 21 still. But the 7, the 14, if there are damages, the landlord has the right to repair it, does not need the tenant's agreement. There is one thing in this, well, there's many things here, but the one important thing here is the reasonable cost. Doesn't say the cheapest, because my auntie's uncle's sister's cousin, he's watched a YouTube video and now he knows how to retail a place. No. The reasonable cost of repairing. So the cost must be reasonable. Okay. Sorry, I don't want to. The only qualification is reasonable cost. Should the tenant fail to respond to the landlord's request for inspection, the landlord must now this is the end. Remember we already said we covered this already. The landlord must, on expiration of the lease, inspect the dwelling within 7 days after the end to assess the damages. We covered that right in the beginning as well. Now, then the landlord may, if the tenant doesn't attend the inspection, he may still deduct the cost of repairing the damage and the cost of replacing the keys from the tenant's deposit. No agreement required. Sorry, there was a question that I had about whether the copies of the slides will be made available. Unfortunately, this is my intellectual property, but you will continue to have you will still continue to get access to this in terms of the the recording. Unfortunately, we don't make them available anymore. because they are our intellectual property. So the landlord may repair the damage. No tenant agreement required. The only qualification is tenant cost. So this is when the tenant does not. When the tenant doesn't attend the inspection, the landlord goes ahead. The tenant just has forfeited his rights, which he has under law, which he opted not to exercise, to be present at the exit inspection. That's all he did. That's all he did. And people have to suffer the consequences of their decisions. Too many people don't understand that. I know I'm sounding horrible. The balance now, if the tenant doesn't appear, you see, it refers, let me just go back here quickly. The K part is when the tenant doesn't respond and come to the exit inspection. K, remember that K is when they don't respond. So in that case, the landlord may still repair the damage. No tenant agreement required. The only qualification is reasonable cost. And furthermore, in the K part, the L part, which is when the tenant doesn't attend, the balance of the deposit and the interest must be refunded to the tenant no later than 20 days. Now, see this, after expiration of the lease, at the end of the lease, so the 21st of the next month. So this is the important differentiation. If we had a look at the 14 days, it said after restoration of the dwelling to the tenant, after the dwelling to the landlord, after the dwelling has been restored, repaired, is basically what it's saying. So the 14 days tick after the damage has been restored. In the case of the tenant not being, in other words, the 21-day one, in the case of the tenant not attending the exit inspection, the clock ticks from the last day of the lease. In other words, the 21st day, not business day, the 21st day. So you've got to hurry up with them repairs. Okay. Now, it goes on to say the relevant receipts which indicate the cost which the landlord incurred must be available to the tenant for inspection as proof of such costs incurred by the landlord. There is so much written into this. So much written into this. The very first thing you will see is it says the receipts must be available for the costs incurred. So what does this mean? It means the landlord cannot just take the money without having the job done and paying for it. The legislature was very clear on that. The legislation is very clear. These receipts, you only get a receipt when you pay for something. Yeah? When you pay for something. So the tenant's not entitled to quotes. The tenant's not necessarily entitled to invoices. Otherwise, they would have said it. So those people that want to do quotes and stuff, I know of somebody who based on quotes, an agency based on quotes, did tenant deductions, then had the work done later. I understood their argument. However, it was thrown out of the tribunal because the tribunal said receipts. In other words, the landlord can't say, I'm going to give you a quote, but I'm going to opt not to do it and I'm going to use the money for my Christmas holiday. That's what this is supposed to prevent. You cannot do that. The landlord cannot say, I'm just going to actually just take the money. No. Unless there's mutual agreement with the tenant. But generally, I don't even know if that's going to work. Because legislation trumps everything else. Legislation trumps everything else. So I'm teaching you what the legislation says. The receipts which indicate the costs which the landlord incurred must be available to the tenant for inspection as proof of such costs incurred. You've got to prove that it cost you. An example here that I've had is where we had a long dispute, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is the landlord got her property back. She then decided she was going to zhuzh it up. There was I've never seen any of these properties. Now I was the manager. There was a passage with a carpet. They said the carpet's not clean. The agent agreed that the carpet wasn't clean enough. I said, okie dokie, we'll send through a carpet cleaner and we'll deduct that from the deposit. And the landlord said, no, just give me the money instead because I'm actually going to pull up the carpet and I'm going to sand the floorboards. And I said, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. Because the Rental Housing Act forbids me to do it. And sometimes landlords don't, we're not their yes people, no? My job is, I'm not their PA. I'm not there to do what they tell me. Part of what they ask, part of why they're paying for me is to advise them. That is to advise them. So I had to say to them, well, look, I'm afraid we can't do that. The only exception that we can possibly do is if we get the tenant to agree. But even then, if they change their mind and they go to the tribunal, there's a possibility that gets overturned. There's a possibility, so you have to understand that. However, in this particular case, the tenant was taking me to the tribunal, taking the landlord. I was representing the landlord to the tribunal because of a early cancellation penalty issue that they were disputing. So there was no way on earth she was going to agree to the landlord getting anything. So I said, I can ask her, but I'm telling you now the answer is going to be no. So you either take the money, either you have the carpets cleaned, we get the invoice, we pay it, we get the receipt. That's the one way of us doing it. When I said get the receipt, your proof of payment is sufficient, together with the invoice. Either we do it that, or if you're going to pull it out straight away, we don't have to worry about it. She said, no, send them in and clean it. You know what she did? She used the tenant's money to clean the carpet. She pulled it out, she chucked it away, and she did the floor. But you know what? I couldn't stop her. As wrong as what I thought it was, I could provide the receipt because I knew my conscience was clear. So yeah. Then it also goes on to say in the Rental Housing Act, the MEC, that's a member of the something, may make regulations, provincial regulations. And so you get the Act, then you get regulations, which are the meat on the bones of the Act, and then everything else we do falls under that. The only reason I want to show you that there is because I don't know why these things have moved around. Unfair practices, I don't know why things have moved around. The unfair practice, the regulations are called the unfair practice regulations. These are the ones we're doing on Friday, if you didn't book yet. The unfair practice regulations relate to damage to property. That's this one over there. Sorry, I don't know why these things have moved. So the MEC may proclaim regulations, and they do refer to the unfair practices. Okay. Now let's talk about the tenant's right to repair damages. Summary of the Rental Housing Act we've just gone through. At or after the expiration of the lease, the landlord may deduct from the tenant's deposit and interest the reasonable cost of loss or repairing damage to the premises that occurred during the lease. But receipts must be available to the tenant for inspection. That's the summary of all that gobbledygook. At or after the expiration of the lease, the landlord may deduct from the tenant's deposit. So this is saying to me, after the lease has ended, and I've done my outgoing inspection, of course, because that has to be done before the lease ends, remember? And so we do the inspection, we take the key, we say, now, thank you for handing the property back. The lease is now formally as an end. Now, I know I'm being technical, but I'm being technical on purpose. Now that I've got the keys back and we've done the inspection, the landlord may deduct from the tenant's deposit the reasonable cost of loss or repairing damage to the premises that occurred during the lease, but they have to get it done and paid for. And pay for it is what I mean. When does the tenant have the right to repair damages? Well, as soon as the lease comes to an end, I've got the keys back, I've got occupation, the landlord's got the right there. So when does that leave the tenant? Before the expiration of the lease. Before the expiration of the lease. So that's exactly why I say, let's do the pre-exit inspection. My goal is not to take money out of people's deposits. To be honest, it's much easier for me to pay them back in the entirety. My goal is not to have to do a whole lot of cleaning between outgoing and ingoing tenants because it causes too much stress for me. Okay, I'm talking as a rental agent now, which I'm pretending to be. My goal is not to cause disputes. My goal is to get the property back. In my best case scenario, I get the property back, I give them a hug, and I say, thank you so much for giving this property back to me in such a good state. Because now I can let the next person move in tomorrow. I can go to the beach this afternoon and I can sleep lekker tonight. And I can use the exit inspection as the starting point of my entry inspection. There's no changes to make. You've taken so much stress off the end of my month at the start of my month. That is my utopia. Now, the tenant's right to repair damages. I believe that most disputes, most issues, whatever, most problems are because we do not communicate with each other well enough. You think the tenant knows what the property should be like. The tenant has not been in the business for 20 years. Okay? The tenant doesn't understand that their rights end the moment they give me the keys back at the end of the exit inspection. The tenant doesn't understand those things, and I believe it's incumbent, and it would, any responsible rental professional should be communicating this to the tenant. But I also know you've got 1,001 things on your mind. That I know as well. So let's be practical about it. Communicate clearly with the tenant. How will the tenant have any idea of what's going to be damages versus fair wear and tear? Because a lot of agents ask me this question, How will the tenant have any idea? But remember, they've got this rough family, and what they think is fair wear and tear is not fair wear. And I'm not being nasty to anybody. I'm just being practical after 20 years in this business. They will only know it if we tell them. How do we tell them and when? The pre-exit inspection. The pre-exit inspection is such a useful tool. Okay? Let me just see. What if a tenant makes repairs without reporting them to the agent? They just incurred costs and now claim reimbursements. Unfortunately, the tenant has no right to. Sorry, there's a question here. What if the new tenant makes repairs without reporting them to the agent? They just incurred costs and now claim reimbursements. It's quite simple, to be honest with you. The tenant has the right to make repairs of any damage. Well, no. If a tenant causes damage to the property, they have the right to repair that at their cost, as long as it, of course, is done to a certain standard. That covers that, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about there was something wrong because you say they just incurred costs and now they claim reimbursements. Unfortunately, they do not have the right to do that. The landlord is responsible to maintain the property, and they should have contacted you. So unfortunately, it's a misunderstanding. I don't know how the misunderstanding occurred, but they don't have the right to do that. What if a tenant installs an inverter without permission, even they had a COC done? If I've got an inverter, it didn't need a COC, and it certainly didn't need any major installation. Generally, when it comes to alterations to the premises, you'd need to refer to your lease agreement. So this is what if a tenant installs an inverter without permission, even though they had a COC done. I would think that they are going to remove that, I'm assuming, at the end of the lease. There's two options. Generally, you'll have to read your lease terms and conditions, but generally it will say that it will say the tenant can't do any alterations. Normally what is accepted that is if the tenant does alterations, they're either making those alterations, they're either donating that to the landlord by making those alterations part of the property, anything they affix to the property, or they remove it at the end, but they have to reinstate the property to the way it was. I fully understand why people do inverters, so I hope that answers those questions. Okay, so I have this, I'm a funny maniki, which you've probably already noticed. So what I have is I have an SOP pack. Now, it doesn't form part of this, I'm going to go through some of these things. It's not part of the what do you call it? The Black Friday deal. It's not included with the training. You'll see that my focus wasn't on that, but it is available for purchase. It's normally $9.99, but today you will be able to purchase it for half that price at $4.99. But let me stop talking about that and let me just show you. Now, I'm talking about, this is one of the thingies in my exit process. So T04A. T means it's a tenant communication document. So let's have a look at this quickly. There we are. So this is my pre-written. So when I say I have an SOP pack, what I have is normally an SOP pack means it's got a checklist. I'll just show you quickly. There's a checklist, okay, where it's got step by step by step, but then you'll see it refers to other things, L's and T's. These are pre-written templates to help you, because I know how busy you are. So to help you do certain things, these are there to make this available to help you. So we're not focusing on this today. So send the tenants an email explaining the exit. As soon as you have received notice, the very first step, in my opinion, is to make sure they understand the process. Okay? And the email template, I've got one for the landlord and one for the tenant. Let's go to the tenant one, because this is important. So this is the process I use, which includes, the pre-exit inspection. So we say, just a quick note to give you some information about the exit process that we will be following to facilitate your vacating your rental property and refunding and the refunding of your rental deposit. Why am I saying this? Because the tenant wants their deposit back in full and pronto. So we've got step 1, pre-exit inspection. Step 2, inspection report. Step 3, exit inspection. Sorry. That's that's basically the structure. And then it says, when will the deposit be refunded? Because why? That's what the tenant wants. Their deposit quickly. Now, quickly. So, step 1, pre-exit inspection. We will arrange a pre-exit inspection with you at the property approximately 3 weeks before the end of your lease. At this inspection, we will go through the property with you and advise of any matters that should be addressed to facilitate, I'm trying to help you, the full refund of your deposit. We can also answer any questions you may have about our expectations of how the property should be left at the end of the tenancy to ensure there are no misunderstandings. Then, step 2, the pre-exit inspection. We will provide you with a full pre-exit inspection report with our recommendations of any issues or matters that need to be addressed prior to the exit inspection. This will highlight any potential issues and help to avoid any misunderstandings and unnecessary disputes. This also gives you the opportunity to arrange for any you can change the wording, because if you purchase this for the $4.99 special, you get the editable version stamp. Leonie and I think, Leonie, you guys are using these adapted versions. This also gives you the opportunity to arrange for any required repairs, cleaning, garden cleaning, etc. prior to the exit inspection. Please note, if you do decide to undertake any repairs, it's important to note these need to be done by suitably qualified persons and to an acceptable standard. And please also note that the Rental Housing Act requires that the property is returned in the same condition. There we go on to the exit inspection. You know this stuff, when I say communicate with them, there's no way on earth that you can have time to sit down and do all of that. So this is why I try and help this way. The exit inspection will be carried out together with you on the last day of your lease, when we will also need to get the keys back from you. This inspection documents the state of the property at the end of your lease and will be compared with the ingoing inspection to determine any deviations and possible deductions from your deposits. You can underline and bold these things. You will not have any opportunity. Let us not get this wrong, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant. Let's all be on the same page, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant. You will not have any opportunity to correct any issues after or during the exit inspection. Please, please, please don't, I'm talking to you now. Please, please, please don't get soft here. Every time you get soft here, it's going to bite you in the behind, I promise you. You will not have any opportunity to correct any issues after or during the exit inspection. We will arrange any repairs required on behalf of the landlord, and the cost of these repairs will be deducted from your deposit as allowed under the Rental Housing Act, or as specified, or as instructed, or as determined by the Rental Housing Act. As required under the Rental Housing Act, the receipts for such repairs will be made available to you on request. Please note there's no obligation. Now, this is also my guidelines for discussion at the pre-exit inspection, to make sure we clarify and we make sure we're all on the same page. There's a whole series of these emails, but this is the most important one. There is no obligation on the landlord to get any specified number of quotes or to get any permission before arranging such repairs, which is why we do the pre-exit inspection, to provide you with the opportunity to do it beforehand. How much more can I help you? I don't mean you, sorry, I'm playing I should maybe have had that I put on there. One that says rental agent, one that says something else. Now, the landlord's right to repair damages. We've done that already. Sorry, sometimes I only do half of this. Damages that can be claimed. What can be claimed? Anything that's not fair wear and tear. Anything caused by the tenant, a member of the tenant's household, or a visitor of the tenant. Defects list must be attached to the lease. Ingoing inspection report. The joint exit inspection must have been arranged at a mutually convenient time and within 3 days prior. This is just a summary to the end of the lease. And the exit inspection must have been done. Cost of the repairs must be reasonable. And the landlord must be able to provide the tenant with receipts. The burden of proof is always going to be on the landlord. So how do you prove damages? I'm summarizing the last 2 hours. How do you prove damages? Compare the exit versus the entry. You've got to have a before and after photos, before and after photos, which is why a defects list is not sufficient. You need to have a comprehensive state of the property report. Next question is, the Act says reasonable costs. How do you prove reasonable? If it's a small amount, I don't think that in my experience, the tribunal is not going to stress about it. But if it's a big amount, I say, get comparative quotes to show that you're in the ballpark. But it doesn't say you have to use the cheapest. You don't have to use the cheapest. You have to have reasonable costs. And you are entitled, remember the landlord has that entitlement. I don't want to go back now. That landlord has the entitlement to get the property back in the same condition it was given, save for fair wear and tears. We went through that now. So if it was Italian tiles from Italy, then it's allowed to be Italian tiles from Italy to fix it. You don't have to go to Taltoria or whatever the tile warehouse and get the cheapest one that fits in the hole. No. So, comparative quotes, you do not have to use the cheapest, but if it's going to be an expensive job, I say get comparisons. One of the matters I'm going to bring up next week at tribunal. What if the landlord doesn't attend the exit inspection and points out damages later? We discussed this. Communicate clearly with the landlord with respect to their rights. And for this, I also have, and I'll show it to you to prove to you that I actually have it. It's part of that pack. where we write this to the landlord. Okay, but this is the one. The tenant got that one over there to explain the process, and here's the process to the landlord. But I've just pulled this out for the purposes of abbreviating this. If you would like to be at the exit, this is one of the clauses in that letter. Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, if you would like to be at this exit inspection, please let me know so that I can arrange it. This is the final opportunity to document any issues. If you would like input in this report, then it's important that we arrange for you to also be at the inspection, as any issues discovered after the final inspection cannot be included in the claim. You can't have moving goalposts, no? Can't have moving goalposts. Damages for fair wear and tear, I think we've covered that a lot. And we spoke about the pre-exit process checklist. I just want to have a look. I think I pulled up something here. I think I pre-prepared something. I think I pre-prepared something. Sorry, things just go a little bit slower. I'm just going to go to the chat and I'm going to share to you the special offer for this pack, and then we're just going to finish off. Okay, so there's the check, there's that where you can purchase the whole pack. And the whole pack, let me just go there quickly and have a look. Okay, so just to show you quickly about this pack, this is my back end, so don't worry. So I've got an exit procedure flow diagram, the checklist. Let's go to the flow diagram, because the flow diagram is actually quite cute, because this is going to help you. Okay, these are all editable versions that you get, by the way, so you can brand them, etc. for yourself. I just want to pull up the flow diagram because this summarizes a lot of what we have done today. So, we start off with a checklist of vacating the property. We explain our exit procedure to our landlords and our tenants. I'm summarizing everything. We then schedule the pre-exit inspection and we let both parties know. We do the pre-exit inspection. We send the pre-exit inspection report to both the landlords and the tenants, and you'll see there's covering letters to go with them, where we highlight certain things. This is also an important process from the landlord, because we say if there's anything that we haven't noted that concerns you, please let us know. Yeah, because you've done the pre-exit. Another important point is you can actually, if there is maintenance that needs to be done prior to the new tenant moving in, or you want to get it done prior to the new tenant to make that handover, you want the property really, really in a good state. You can deal with it year two. Because remember, what often happens is some tenants, we live with things. We live with certain little niggles. We just live with them. But if we moved in with those little niggles, we might get upset now. So we send the pre-exit inspection report to the landlords and the tenants. We can also action out of the pre-exit inspection report certain maintenance to be done. If there's things we're unclear about the level, thank you, Leonie, whether the snooker table is level, we can deal with it here. Or if the landlord's concerned about it, we say to the landlord, let us know. We then schedule the exit inspection, the end of the lease. I should actually have the exit inspection before the end of the lease, sorry, because technically it's about the key getting back. So we do the exit inspection, then we start going through. So we've got an exit inspection report. Is there an ingoing inspection report? No. Then we can only deduct arrears and things like that. We can't deduct damages, and we've got to release the deposit in 7 days. There's your 7/14/21. If there is an ingoing inspection report, was the tenant present? No. We can still do everything, but we have 21 days. There was an exit inspection report and the tenant was there. Then these are the email templates. We can fix the repairs, and we have time to fix the repairs in 14 days after fixing the repairs. So that's the flow diagram. It makes more sense now that we've been through the detail. So I have shared that that link there with you if you wanted to purchase that at today's special price. So let me stop selling and get back into finishing the presentation. I was actually quite worried we were going to go over time. So we talked about the checklist, and the checklist and everything's available. How to deal with the unavoidable disputes, the Karens and the Kens of this world. There's the legal way and there's the practical way. If at all possible and your landlord is amenable, try and negotiate a mutually agreeable resolution. I always think the best solution is to get an agreement so that you can all move forward. Okay? If that is not possible though, let's say there's no agreement. I believe, and I believe in my checklist is done like this, we proceed with repairs. And if the tenant, I would say something to the tenant like, I understand that you aren't in agreement. Okay, and I fully respect this. And I understand that we aren't going to agree to disagree. But that's exactly why the Rental Housing Tribunal was set up. Because it gives us a third party that can have a look at all the evidence, that knows the legislation, can protect you and make sure that I am not abusing your rights. Okay? They can protect you. And if they take a decision, it's a third party, that decision is the same as a magistrate's court ruling. The same. That we will have to abide by it, or our landlords will have to abide by it. So ladies and gentlemen, or Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, please, if you aren't happy, I don't hold it against you. Please approach the tribunal. The alternatives to the tribunal are the small claims court, if the amount's under, I think it's now 25,000 rand, or a magistrate's court. Magistrate's court, you need a lawyer. Rental Housing Tribunal, you don't even need a lawyer. So Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, I fully understand. Please feel free to speak to the tribunal. Now, you know that every second person knows a lawyer, is a lawyer, studied law, all that sort of nonsense. Don't let that worry you. Don't let that worry you at all. Don't let that worry you at all. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, that basically brings us to the conclusion of what I wanted to cover today. I think we've fitted a lot in. As soon as, I hope you've got value. I think I actually trust you've got value given the feedback. I'm just going to go back to my Zoom McGafters now so that I can see what's going on. Yes, that is really it. Oh, sorry, I did have that question. I'm going to go back to that question. The question was fully loaded. And when I say that, I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm just meaning it's quite a complicated process, quite a complicated question. Let's see what we can deal with it now. We have problem tenants, says the person that asked the question. The entry inspection was done by me, but they were all over the house and did not pay attention. They are making false claims, such as a key that was broken off in the door, and I was 100% sure that no key was broken off as I opened the door with the only key we had. This was handed to them. Then okay, so let's do that one. That one, the point is if they are claiming something, they are going to have to prove it if they want to put in a claim. And if you are confident, then I wouldn't worry too much about that one, okay? Because you said no key was broken off as I opened the door with the only key we had. So I don't see a problem there. And that was handed to them. Then it goes on to say, then an interleading, there's a number of issues here, I'm just trying to pull them apart. Then an interleading door slammed shut. This was a few days after they moved in. We got a locksmith out and he did not find a broken off key in the lock. So the bottom line is the locksmith didn't find it, so you've got proof. Make sure that the locksmith has noted something to you in writing, okay? We got a locksmith out and he did not find a broken off key in the lock. On the insistence of the tenants, we replaced the lock. In that particular case, the question then that I've been asked is, who is responsible for the payment? Now, I would have explained to the tenants, or you should have explained, I'm not berating you. You should have explained to the tenants, okay, we will get a locksmith out. But I'm 100% sure there is no key broken off in that lock. If the key is broken off, okay, and the lock needs to be replaced, the landlord will pay. But if it isn't, you are going to pay. So in this particular case, I believe the tenant is responsible for the payment. The tenant is not entitled to a new lock. Okay, although in this country, I've wondered to myself whether that might be a good idea. The tenant is not entitled to it. I think it would have been nice to explain that to them beforehand, but you didn't. I would still bill them for it. Okay? Then it goes on to say the interleading door opened and closed at the inspection. After the wind or draft, the door was damaged and had to be repaired. Who is responsible for the payment? Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I should actually say, as far as I'm confused. Anybody else got any thoughts on this? The interleading door opened and closed at the inspection. After the wind or the draft, the door was damaged and had to be repaired. My argument from the agent or the landlord's perspective is going to be, it was absolutely fine at the ingoing inspection. If it's not absolutely fine at the outgoing inspection, it's not fair wear and tear, is it? Or is it? Anybody else can give me. I would argue it's not fair wear and tear. You're the person that left the window open or whatever that caused the draft, so you are responsible for that damage. The pool was clear, it says. There we go on. This is why I left it till now. The pool was clear but had sludge at the bottom. When the pool pump was tested, the pool cleaner worked, but we had to change filter sand on previous tenant's account. Now they are claiming 4,000 Rand for cleaning and balancing of the water. Okay. These are the new tenants are now claiming 4,000 Rand for cleaning and balancing of the water. The pool company report said only pool sand had to be changed and O-ring. Okay, I think you've taken a lot of good steps. Okay, let me say that. The pool company report said only pool sand had to be changed and O-ring. Make sure that, I'm assuming you've got that in writing. You say to the tenants, I'm sorry, we're not paying you the 4,000 Rand for cleaning and balancing of the water. So you deduct it from the tenant, you just ignore the invoice and tell them to go fly a kite. And once again, you have that discussion where you say, I understand that you feel the way you do. I do understand that you feel the way you do. However, it's not the landlord's responsibility. Maintenance of the pool is your responsibility. We did have because it says here that you had the pool sand replaced on the previous tenant's account. So I'm assuming that you said there was a little bit of sludge at the bottom. Let's not even worry about that. But that would be my feeling, and I would explain to them that they're welcome to dispute that at the Rental Housing Tribunal. Let me see what else. If there's anything more. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes all of the questions as well. So I am now going to bid you adieu. I really would like to say thank you. I appreciate you joining me this morning. You will see, do you like my little picture of the new me in the rental sphere? I think it's quite cute. It makes me look like I'm sitting in the bubble, but that's exactly what the rental sphere is, by the way. Also, given a lot of those questions, I do have a subscription whereby, and I'll put something in there, I will send out a follow-up email with all, with the special offer and all that stuff in it. I do have a subscription whereby for a monthly amount, you can have me on speed dial, like call a friend, except that the friend happens to be an expert, call an expert, whatever you want to call it. So, yes. And then, of course, on Friday, we're going to be looking at the unfair practice regulations, which we touched on ever so briefly. So, without further ado, let me stop the share. I appear from the rental sphere. You can also join us in the rental sphere. That is where we make sure that rental agents are taken care of. For now, thank you very much. Have a great day. I hope to see you on Friday if you haven't yet booked. You will get the recording this afternoon, and we'll go from there. Thank you to everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Bye for now.